So welcome back to Cult Pros. It's been a little while, I think about a year since we released our last episode, and this episode is the first of a new format. So we're going to be trying something quite different. Going forward, the podcast is going to be me chatting to some of the most interesting people that I've met in cybersecurity. And we're going to be hearing from founders, we're going to hear from CISOs, we're going to hear from people in marketing and brand teams, all about how they either got their startup off the ground or their experience working with startups as a design partner or a customer, so that you can learn everything that you need to know to make your startup successful and acquire your first customers. In this first episode, we have somebody really interesting. So we have Justin Woody, who's one of the co-founders of Twine Security. Now, if you've not heard of Twine Security, they are doing some really, really interesting stuff in the agentic employee space. So they are starting off tackling a load of problems in identity. And they have already had a load of traction. So they were in the Innovation Sandbox at RSA. They've been recognized at Black Hat by Gartner. All of the places really that you would want to be recognized as a cybersecurity startup. And Justin, one of the co-founders, leads the marketing there. We met probably 2 years ago, I think. And at Yaya, we worked with Twine to create their initial brand, their website, and we still work together with Justin and his team on their marketing. Justin's been a great friend and advocate as well as a client at Yaya. I've really enjoyed getting to know him. He's a really, really interesting guy. He's got a lot of really interesting experience too. So he has a background. He worked at Mandiant, part of Google Cloud. He was also one of the top people at Claroty, as most of the founders at Twine were. So he brings a load of experience of working at really fast growing businesses in this space. He has also founded a venture capital firm that works with cybersecurity businesses. So he brings all these different perspectives, and we're going to hear all about those in this conversation. As well as his background and his experience, we're going to talk a little bit about the journey that he went on, first at Claroty and then at Twine, around attracting customers and, particularly obviously CISO security buyers to those businesses. One of the things in this conversation that I think is super interesting, that really stood out to me and that I've always really, really admired about the approach that Twine took, is just how many people they didn't just go and talk to. I think it was something like 250 different CISOs that they spoke to before they settled on the initial direction for the business, but also just how many people they actually listened to and took on board what they were saying and used that input to shape their product. Certainly something, that we really, really advocate with all of our clients. And I think Twine is an excellent example of how to do that really, really well and ultimately get to a place where everything you're doing feels very, very human-centered, and the product that they have ended up creating really targeted at one of the biggest pain points that those people spoke about. So I think this is a really cool conversation to get to listen to. I think wonderful opportunity to get some time to just kind of chat with somebody like Justin, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So let's get into it. Let's talk about you a little bit. Let's talk about your journey, how you kind of got to where you are, as founder of Twine, with a very strong track record working in cybersecurity over the years. How did you get into this? How did you find your way into cybersecurity? What's your backstory?
I think, back in the day, well, I have a lot of gray hair now, so it was a long time ago, right? We were all connecting a bunch of systems and figuring out how things talk together. And I don't know, but viewers probably don't remember, but we used to have pagers in the day where they would vibrate and then you go to a phone and make a telephone call. And back in the day, I was like, all right, I'm going to work for a company that will move beyond pagers, and let's actually send these little things called text messages on what was our early cell phones. So worked for a company called Bell Atlantic, where we put where we started saying this is how we connect our systems, and we'll be able to send these little text messages, but that's it. Nothing will ever come of it. It's gonna be phone calls, and these are just gonna help us. And from there, the journey took me like a river. And the momentum built around cyber, and I went from doing text messaging to networking to protecting big financial institutions with IBM, and then moved to incident response at Mandiant. Then made the jump to industrial technology to help protect the world we live in, and then came here.
I think pages is my cutoff point of technology. I think I can hold a decent conversation about kind of mini disc players, even go back as far as cassettes. But pages was just a thing that I saw on TV shows and films. I never quite understood the concept of rush to find a payphone to call somebody back from a pager.
Yeah, you need a little more gray, and then you'll be there.
Well, actually, my gray hair is all kind of in my beard mainly these days. I'm just grateful to have hair at this point. I think I'm watching a lot of my friends sadly slide away into baldness, and I'm hanging on in there. So that's cool. When you kind of think back over the journey that you kind of got into, what was it particularly about cybersecurity that really piqued your interest, and why did you move in that direction?
Well, I think maybe I'll over the last few years, right, in cyber, I think teams and companies have been driven by tools, right? So they have a tool, the tool tells them that something's bad and they've got to go do something. It's a really bottom-up approach. And I remember this distinctly to this day. I remember a time when I was working for Mandiant, which is now Google, and I was running the security operations center for them in the Silicon Valley. And somebody came to us and said, look, your detections missed something, and you need to go talk to the customer about how a Chinese actor got into their environment. And I had to get on a plane and go to their office along with a couple of other folks, and stand in front of the security team and say, look, we didn't catch this. This is why. And it was a hard time, to be able to look people in the eye and said, the bad guys won here. And from there, it's always been on my mind, how do we not have a top-down approach? How do we do better and not just be driven by tools and alerts and all the rest? And I think this was what the passion was, as I thought about what Twine is and what Twine could be. Was kind of this story was in my mind the whole time.
Yeah, and I guess that is a trend that I certainly have noticed. I think particularly when you kind of go to conferences and things, there's so many startups within cybersecurity. It's such a hot space. You could end up with a business with hundreds and hundreds of tools. That very much feels like the trajectory. Has that always been the case in cybersecurity, or do you think that's getting more extreme now?
I think conferences are a specific, what is the right word? It becomes very prevalent and out there with conferences, because last week I was in Houston for a conference, And there was a competing conference downstairs at the Houston Convention Center, and there was a big ocean shipping conference. And I looked through the windows and the doors. They didn't have a pass, so they wouldn't let me in. They turned me away. I felt very small at that point. But I looked through the windows down onto the floor, and every booth had a different widget. Right, some booths had these cool forklifts, and other booths had these new ways to tie things off, or these submarines to inspect the ships as they're shipping and so forth. And I think many industries have the actual physical tools to look and do, and people can their widgets. Whereas like cyber, it's all about the software. And if it's all about the software, the message becomes much more important, has to be clearer, and you're competing against, things in people's minds, not things people can hold.
Yeah, and I suppose as the number of threats and the number of different things that could potentially create vulnerabilities increases, it sort of feels natural that you would also increase the number of tools and the number of things to hit on that. I guess, what's the problem with that? When you say you were kind of motivated by not taking that top-down approach, what is the downside of doing that?
Well, I think the idea that we want to move from a bottom up, where tools kind of give our daily, if I have a day where my team comes in and we do a quick opening, meeting in the morning and say, hey, look, what do we have going on for today? And people are like, well, this tool, I've got 13 alerts here. I've got this queue over here. I've got to manage, and I've got this. It's really, we're letting the tools manage us. Instead, we should have systems that, all right, these are my key objectives, and my daily activity should be driven by those key objectives. And until, and I think this is why artificial intelligence and agentic solutions have become are such a boon and such a I guess the pinnacle, right? Is that for the first time we'll be able to actually have a top-down approach.
I think maybe let's just jump in and kind of get into how you got to Twine. So that's the problem that you're trying to solve. Tell me a little bit about the early days, the first conversations when you start to talk about this idea, and realize that was the thing that you wanted to go after.
Well, I think that the early conversations turned out to be not what we went after. And if I wind the clock back to when we started having the first conversations, it was pre the launch of the large launch of GPT, OpenAI and ChatGPT. They were in the infancy, and they weren't prevalent. And we were talking about how we could how you could do a top-down approach through tools and through automation and through other things that we had available at the time. But then as we continued to talk, and ChatGPT and the LLM started to proliferate and started to show their value, we're like, all right, this is the ideal solution to build as a foundation for a top-down approach. And I think the discussions were around that. And we were also, from the OT environment, the whole team was from Claroty, so we were very familiar with vulnerabilities. And we started talking to, I think we talked to maybe 250 cyber leaders and CISOs. And as we kept talking and kept iterating our concept, we were like, hey, so we want to do this for vulnerability. And they were like, no, you should do this for identity. And we're like, no, we know vulnerability. And they're like, yes, but our biggest pain is not vulnerabilities, it's identity. And we heard this on 99.9% of our conversations, which made us say, all right, I guess identity is a problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way to validate your product, I guess. And, going back, so you knew the rest of the team from Claroty, you sit down and go, we want to try and attack this with a top-down solution. AI appears like miraculously, kind of changes the game. I'm interested in those 250 conversations that you had. How did you run those? Did you know you were going to do 250 at the outset? Tell me a bit about that process.
we thought we were going to do 100. And so we started building our list of everybody we knew, friends, family, former customers, investors. And we just started building the list. And I think early on, the first, I'm going to say 20, 30 conversations we had, we were kind of like not a ship without a rudder, but we were throwing several ideas out there for people to give feedback on. But then I think as we started getting later in on the conversations, we started getting more focused. And then once we sort of passed 100, we had a fairly crisp idea of what we were going to do. And our product pitch, our pain points were much more focused and mature at that point. And then I think it became we changed from help us develop the idea to now we're going to validate. Like, this is what we're building. So we went from idea creation or idea iteration, let's call it, to validation.
I'm curious of the 250 people that you spoke to, did any of them then, they basically told you what product they want. Did any of them then convert into design partners?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's where all our design partners came from, was that. And I think there's real value there, right? The idea that you listen to people and people become, obviously you're building a solution that they need, but they're also become, there's pride that, hey, I helped drive the idea behind this successful company. And then there's a belief of shared mission.
Yeah. One of the things that, we've done in the past quite a bit and really encourage people to do is to think about the process of like product validation and research right from the point where you have a hypothesis of a value proposition, is actually just to take that, literally just say it to people, just write it down, just WhatsApp it to them, and just try and get some help validating and iterating that. Because if you invest the time and the effort at that stage, it's actually a lot more cost effective than going out and building something and figuring out further down the line that people don't actually want it, or won't pay money for it. I really like the fact that you've kind of gone through, help us figure out what the idea could be, help us pick which of several different ideas we want to progress with, then validate it. Plus you're like constantly presumably iterating the pitch and the messaging, and then ultimately bringing in design partners and customers just through that process before, really, I guess you've even started to sit down and write code and think about those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think it's a spiral, right? That keeps getting smaller and smaller until you hit the middle, and each conversation gets your spiral to be tighter and tighter. I think that's how I think about it.
How strategic was that? How much did you set out intentionally at the start of that process, thinking at the end of this process we should have some customers signed up, and how much of it was kind of happenstance and just kind of worked out that way?
No, we were pretty intentional, but like we didn't quite anticipate that we would be, when we started the conversation, we thought our ideas were great, and we still think they were pretty good, but just listen, the more you listen, the more focused you get. And I think at the beginning we were probably too broad with our thinking, and the conversations helped us to get to be great at like one thing, like be focused on this area. Don't try and solve 8 things at once.
I mean, that's great advice. Both like listen more and focus more, I think, two things we definitely would preach. I'm curious, within that process, when did you start the conversations around investment, and how fleshed out was what you wanted to do by the time you started that?
I think it's a great question. I think the main thinking around our investment strategy was, and I think it goes to our culture. It's how do we find people that we want to work with and are willing to be on the journey with us. I think there's a lot of investment strategy out there that's very I'm going to call it mercenary, but it's not a journey. It's not a partnership. It's not collaborative. It's, I'll give you money, you do this, you'll do what I say. Like, and our approach was very different. How do we find investors that want to be on the mission? And that was around a lot of conversations and getting to know different people in the environment, and being able to build on those relationships.
Can we give a quick shout out to Megan and to Hattie, who we both know? We had we actually had Henry and Hannah from Geordie on the podcast last week. So another member of the 1011 stable. I think it's been like really interesting, having worked with you at Twine and worked with them at Geordie, and then worked with Megan as well, and Hattie. The 1011 relationship feels very like close and special, and I think the advice and guidance that they give, in a lot of our interactions around the kind of marketing and brand and all of that kind of stuff, it feels really, really valuable, and the relationship feels like a really great partnership.
It's amazing. Like they have they bring the founders together on a monthly basis, and we talk about shared problems. I think 3 weeks ago we were at the Gartner CIO or a CISO summit in New Orleans, where 1011 brought their companies together to pitch on stage about the cool, innovative things that 1011's doing in the market to 100 Fortune 500 CISOs. And it's this type of relationship where it's not transactional. It's about how do we actually have the journey together. And I think the guys at Geordie are in the journey also.
Cool. So maybe just let's have a think about that kind of journey from 0 to 1. I guess we're kind of doing this chronologically now, where you've had the idea, you validated it. We've now got some money in the bank from investment. Tell me about that kind of 0 to 1 process. What was it like getting the company off the ground from scratch?
I think one of the things was we had to figure out how we were going to message, how we were going to look externally, how
did you do that, Justin?
Be pursued. How did we do that? We started interviewing marketing companies, actually. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, imagine that.
Anyone stand out?
So we interviewed a couple that our investors had recommended, and we also interviewed a couple that we had worked with in the past at some other startups. And then we interviewed this. We got a recommendation for this company in the UK that had on their website that they could book a meeting dynamically. And so I said, "Oh, I'll book this meeting, and I'll book it from 6 hours from now. We'll see what happens, because why not? They have availability." And so I go to this meeting with this company thinking, "Oh, I kind of know what I already want. I already have my company picked out, right?" And these two guys showed up in a phone booth, and this booth was really small. And so Phill and Adam were in this booth, and I could see the sweat running down their foreheads. It was so hot. And I don't know, we started talking, and it goes back to the investor question. Like, how do you know who you want to work with? And it's about, are they on the journey with you? And I think I felt that the journey was there. And so we started working together. And that was great. Like, I think you asked what happened at day 0. It was finding the messaging, finding the right people to work with. And then I remember we went through a few workshops, and I guess I'll turn a question back to you, Phill. Like, we had these early workshops. Like, what did you think of us when you were doing these workshops?
I was just thinking to at that point have spoken to 250 different potential ICPs is not usual, right? Like that is something that we're normally saying to people. You should go out and do more of this. So the fact that you all arrived and you were like, we actually have like proper validation around this kind of stuff, it made everything a lot more simple. So it was kind of a luxury to be so far kind of down the path to be able to do that, which was great. And then I remember because before we did the workshops, we did individual interviews with people, And the thing that came across was very much like, we don't just want to do the like standard, blue and blend into the crowd and all of the rest of this kind of stuff. It was very much like, tell us how we can be bold and how we can stand out. And there was already, the concept of the digital employee, which I think we can get into a little bit more in a minute. And bringing that to life. And I wish I had like the full list of all the different things that people suggested, from like, I wonder if we could make, like, somebody did suggest, I wonder if we could get Pixar to actually create an animation for us. And then they're like, that's how big we want you to think as you're going through this project. I think to have permission to do that is like really, really great from our side. And then I guess the other thing that was really cool was there's a dynamic there between you all, because you've had that experience of working together for quite a long time. That means that you have like little shortcuts, and everybody's comfortable saying what they think, and it just kind of felt like we were being welcomed into that, really nicely from day one. And it's obviously stayed quite a close relationship since then as well.
I was hoping to hear something really juicy, like like those guys, like some type of juicy tidbit. But okay, we stayed away there.
Again, that will be on the Patreon, so there is the real behind the scenes. Yeah, no, it was a great process. I guess at that point, when we first started working together, how many people were in the company at that point?
Maybe, I'm gonna say 12.
Okay.
Something like that.
So I guess finding those people, deciding on the culture, all of those kinds of things. I'm curious, like when you first started doing that versus after kind of nailing the messaging and crystallizing and tightening those things up. Just what was your experience then of how the culture evolved?
Like, it's easy to talk about culture. It's much harder to live the culture that you put on paper as aspirational. And I think a lot of that living the culture happens behind the scenes, and it's easy to talk about, hey, you know what, this is what I believe, and this is why I did it. Hey, I helped this person, I did this XYZ, but doing it without any recognition, I think is much harder. And this is something that I know personally, I've unvalidated action, right? The idea that I'm going to work behind the scenes to make things better without people giving me accolades is a big part of what we try to do.
Yeah. I guess, do you feel like that's, you've now become a founder, having, I think, spent most of your career working in other people's businesses and other people's cultures. How would you express the things that you wanted your company to feel like in terms of culture?
Well, I'll say that what you dream about when you're getting ready to, as a startup, and then what actually happens are slightly different, because at the end of the day, companies are made up of people that aren't, they aren't just these widgets that you can move and mold at will. Each one has their own perspective, and a lot of times it's really good. And I think for me, the biggest, the perfect mold and what I was dreaming of needed to change a little bit, probably for the good in most cases, maybe a little bit in the other direction, but to adapt to the different, the diversity and the people we have within the company.
So I think so immediately before starting the business, you all worked together at Claroty. That must have been an incredibly wild, like the growth that you would have experienced there, incredible. What were the things that you learned from Claroty that have really impacted how you're thinking about building Twine now?
I think there's maybe 2 or 3 things. One, I think, is your first customer is your best customer. A lot of people think that, hey, we should go after our second customer is the most important, or our next customer is the most important. But your best one is the one that's been with you forever and has stuck by you, and will stick by you, right? And I think this is something I saw at Claroty quite a bit. The idea that you had these loyal customers, and I think this is one of the points for sure. I think the other point I learned at Claroty is that as you grow and you get bigger and bigger, the ability to innovate becomes harder and harder. And the ability to your ship gets bigger and takes longer to turn. And I think that how do you build a company into a large size, but yet still remain nimble? And you hear about like the NVIDIAs, like, hey, we're still nimble. I don't know if that's true. But I think this is one of the core things that I want to make sure that Twine stays nimble, and be able to pivot and continue to innovate, especially in the space we're at.
Yeah. How do you think you'll do that?
I think the biggest question that comes up when you talk about being nimble in organizations is, hey, if I do this, then I'm going to cannibalize my business. And you have to be ready to do that. I listened to this podcast with Steve Ballmer at Microsoft. This is one of the things that he brought up. He's like, look, there's so many times in Microsoft where we were going to, we want to do one thing, but it was potentially cannibalize another business. And I said, let's just go do it. Because it's move or die in this space. And I think this is don't worry about cannibalization, worry about solving the problem.
Interesting. Have you already experienced anything like that as you've been building the kind of initial phases of Twine?
I think we have. Like when you build some of the things we've built initially, we're like, all right, the market's already moved, our use cases have already progressed, and we're gonna have to leave that along the way, like and just continue to move.
Yeah, I guess you need the space. The space that you're in is like it's not even clearly defined really enough certainly at the point where you start Twine to be able to make too many assumptions and expect them to pay off, right? Like things are just constantly shifting, so everything is like a little bit of a guess, and you're kind of seeing how things are unraveling and the tech's moving on, and all those kind of things, which is hugely exciting, but I guess also potentially quite stressful.
I think it's one of the few times in technology where you have big organizations that are building the foundation, right? Like I remember back in the day, Microsoft is building a foundation, or Azure or AWS, right? They're like, come run on us, come use our stuff. But here you have, hey, use our stuff for OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever. Use our stuff, but by the way, we're also going to be we're going to compete with you and build alongside. And so the race is on, not just to figure out what the best platform to use, but how do you not get sucked up by some of the players?
Yeah. So Justin, tell me a bit about, how are you building a moat around Twine? What is it that you're doing that makes you stand out, different? How are you going to make sure that, I don't want to say last person standing, but this is a very competitive space. There are lots of people talking about, agents within cybersecurity. This is your chance. Give us the pitch for Twine.
I think that there are agents. I think there's a horizontal and there's a vertical aspect to this understanding. I think the horizontal aspect, MIT had this study that 95% of AI projects fail, right? And that's absolutely because they're solving for horizontal problems, these broad things that go across. And it's hard to determine ROI for horizontal. Is helping me write a better a better paper. All right. How do I gauge ROI for that? Right. How do I that is writing a better email through, ChatGPT help on ROI. And I think that we're building this horizontal layer, but I think where companies are really going to excel is this vertical. And I think this is where the moat becomes the discussion, is the deep vertical skills that are needed to be an expert in your discipline. And the deeper you can get and the narrower you can get initially is going to protect you, because there's no way these big companies like OpenAI and Anthropic are going to be or have the discipline for the million different slivers that are out there with not just cyber but with tech in general. Right? They're going to build this broad platform, and it's what we're building is these deep vertical slivers to address people's needs. That's the moat.
That's the moat.
And it's not easy.
Why? What makes it hard?
It's because you have to have a team of experts that you're building your tool around, and you've got to invest in that, and it can't just be at a superficial layer.
Interesting. You mentioned a couple of different people there. I think Anthropic, OpenAI. When you think about your competitors and the threats from outside, are they the kind of people that first come to mind as opposed to other people within cybersecurity?
No, but it is. If you're not watching for keeping an eye on those people, then you're not doing your job. I like to do a fair bit of boating here in the Seattle area, and you can go out and take your boat, and you're avoiding these little boats, as you're the ones that are close. You're making these quick corrections, but you're always looking out for the big container ships, right? And because they move so fast, and if you aren't careful, that's going to run you over. I think this is a fair analogy, is that you always should be, you're looking around for the near-term collisions, but keep an eye out for the big ships that are coming, and because they're the ones that can wipe you out.
Thinking about where you've got to with Twine, I guess what, 2 years in now?
I think we launched just about, is it a year ago?
Yeah. Well, I think we first started working together. It was definitely, as you say, it was pretty hot in that phone booth. So that must have been summer time over here. I'm glad you don't have a picture of that. It's kind of seared in my memory because it was just very uncomfortable standing that close to somebody in such a small space for such a long time.
I'm also curious, like you said, like, okay, we got to take this call. This company we've never heard of reached out to us. Like, well, you're probably like, oh boy, I got to take this call at 6 p.m. at night. Great.
It was, yeah. I mean, obviously we didn't know where that was going to go. I didn't even think we knew who you were at that point. Really, did we? I think it was.
No, we were still in stealth. Yeah, we were. We just received our first round of funding, and we were probably 3 or 4 weeks into that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, whatever we said must have made a ton of sense, because we must have looked terrible. We must have just been drenched in sweat and struggling to breathe.
You told me this story about beer sales or something, and I don't know about how. Yeah. It's a good story.
Yeah, it's a good story. Well, that's how we win business. Let's segue to you're currently CMO at Twine. You've got a lot of experience, I guess, in getting people interested in buying a product. I'm sure for a lot of people listening to this who are kind of just starting out, they'll be asking the question, how do you win your first customers? And there's like a million different marketing and sales tactics out there in the world. Which are the ones that actually work? Like, where are you putting your chips, and where would you recommend that people start to try and get those first customers over the line?
I think we touched on it earlier around events, and when you walk into an event, you can walk away more confused than when you walked in, because there's nothing tangible to hold, right? It's all software. It's in the cloud. And I think as I've matured, both physically and with mentally, I guess. I've come to the point where it's just cut the BS, right? And just tell it like it is. Be more straightforward and be very not just talk about trust, but actually live it, right? And I think if people can determine an authenticity with you, and you know, these guys aren't blowing smoke at me. What they're talking about, they're like very prescriptive that, hey, this is what we built, this is what we envision, this is what we'd like to do with you, and not, hey, this is what we do and we haven't built half the things, right? Like so many people do. I think that's the currency today. I think that we're getting more and more inundated with, you know, digital marketing. I think trust is a currency.
Yeah. How do you break the ice with people? How do you kind of get the conversation started in the first place to be able to go and build that trust?
Like, I'm interested in people. I love talking to people. I love understanding. I think one of the most interesting things, and maybe this is a bit off topic, but I like to know what people do for fun. Like what about you, Phill, is interesting. I think getting to know people, whether they buy a product, become your design partner, how do you get them to be your friend first? And that sounds a little cliche, I think. But you know, that's part of my creed, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been quite cool for us is when we've been, you know, we were at Black Hat together a couple of months ago. We were at RSA a few months before that. And especially, you know, we're in London. You're out in Seattle. You know, we're all just kind of spread all over the world. I really like those events because it's just an opportunity to just get some time together in person. I know we went and you don't think you actually saw how bad at the golf thing I actually was in Vegas. Okay, cool. Well, you know, nowhere to hide.
I would not put you guys on the PGA tour. Yeah, spectators maybe.
I don't know. They're like the spectators at the Ryder Cup. I think that might be a bit too rowdy for me, to be honest.
I heard. Yeah, that was a bit rowdy.
Not
too much for the team.
But that for me is like when we go to those events, that's the thing that really stands out for me. And you know, I feel like you go to the exhibition floor, and I kind of walk away with just like a bit of a headache. And you know, I find it quite difficult to be in those spaces because they're just so overwhelming. And I guess if you look at those things, you go, well, that seems like an obvious opportunity that like all the buyers are going to be there. We're going to have like a stand and we can make a little noise. We can get people to come over. I talk to people on the stands, and like, I just hear the same thing, which is like, well, I don't know what we're doing here. We just like scanning badges and adding names to a database and then kind of coming out the other side of it. And then what people say is actually like, it's not really about that. It's about the opportunity to go and actually get some FaceTime with people, talk to them, build the trust, you know, build a relationship, all of those kind of things. But I guess that's kind of hard to do just from like a standing start, right? Like how do you just meet people and start building a relationship in the first place if you're just kind of starting out as a business?
I don't think we had that problem because we came from Claroty. We had a number of people. You know, we've been around. I've got a lot of gray hair. We know a lot of people. I don't think relationships is our problem. I think events in general are a bit strange. I have a very different take on events, and maybe other people do. But I think that. I don't think that was a problem for us, is the relationship side of things.
You've also been very, very good at getting up on stage as one of the hottest new startups in the space. So Sandbox finalist at Black Hat. I know you're basically just traveling around on a roadshow, getting invited to all of these different things. Sandbox is, you know, I guess it's the dream for a lot of businesses. What can you share in terms of your experience of getting up there? That, how does that all work? How do you do it? What did you learn from doing it? And what's been the impact of getting up there and being recognized in that way?
I think one of the tangible things that goes along with Sandbox is they require you to put your message in 3 minutes. Not a demo, right? Just your message. And in defining your message into 3 minutes, which includes how you're going to go to market, like what value do you bring, what problem do you solve, is very challenging. And I think it was a great experience for us to really home in and determine, this is my elevator pitch right here. I don't know how many times we've reused our opening lines and our first, this is the problem, this is what we do, as part of our pitches going forward. But it helped you distill that. I had this experience. Everyone talks about the elevator pitch. I literally was in the elevator at the Gartner CISO conference, and we had just presented on stage, and I was going to go up and get some water. And I was on the 16th floor, and this gentleman jumped in, and he was on, I think, the 14th floor. So I literally had 14 floors to have a discussion, and those elevators moved fast, by the way. And so he says, "Hey, I saw you on stage. It was great. Really, what we'd love to talk about how you could help us, but like, what's the key thing that you guys could do for us so I can like talk to my teams about it?" And I literally had 15 seconds. And it makes you think about, how important it is to have that. What pain do you solve? I have a follow-up call with this team, by the way.
You didn't think about pushing the fire alarm, trapping him in there, getting the deck out?
My brain is not that fast.
We've got 15 seconds.
I could have gotten off on his floor and followed him to his room, but no.
Yeah, you've got to do what it takes to pick the sales. If we, yeah. Thanks, Alex. Thanks. If you went back in time now to founding day of Twine, what would you tell yourself? What are the lessons that you've learned? What are the things that have surprised you as you've gone through that journey?
I think I would have doubled down on this, on when you listen to people, oftentimes you are listening through your own lens. And your ideas, this is what I'm thinking about creating. I just want these guys to agree with me. And I want validation on what I do. Please don't disagree. Like, if I can get out of this call with convincing the people what my idea is what I want to do, I think is probably the biggest thing. Going into the discussions and without with the question is this pain point big enough for you to purchase tomorrow? I think would be the first question I would ask in all our validation calls.
That's interesting. I mean, we do, when we do our validation calls, that is kind of one of the questions that we would ask. We also just ask, like, how much would you pay for this? Which I think gives you a sense of like, how valuable is it? And, having done a lot of user interviews, designing products, and just interviews for messaging and branding and all of those kind of things, I always think it just really helps to be quite introverted in those situations, because you go onto those calls and the purpose of it is to learn, but you would be amazed how many people just like can't help themselves start pitching. And that thing when you get to the end of like a Teams call or Zoom or whatever, and it's like, this person talked for 80% of the time, and you're like, we had 1 hour with that person. They had a load of really good stuff in their head, and we got 20% of the time was them actually telling us what was going on. And I think it does takes a lot of self-restraint to be able to do those things. One last question, Justin, and it's been super interesting hearing your perspective on all of these things. As a founder and as somebody whose startup is really flying, what would be your biggest lessons that you could give to other founders? And I always think it's really interesting to just think about the people who are just like a couple of steps behind you. What would you say to those people that would help them and their startups to be successful?
I guess I'll take a messaging, marketing, growth, sales approach to it, right? Because I guess that's what the area that I live in. For me, I think it's so easy to get to fall into the trap. This is what you should do. This is the framework for success, right? This is what Wiz did, and you should always do what Wiz does, right? And pretty soon, everybody's doing exactly what Wiz is doing. And I think for me, how do you do more impactful but less noise? How do you do less events but make your impact bigger? And how do you there's 1,000 things you can do, but how do you pick 5 that are actually going to make a difference, and how do you measure those things? And I think I live by this mantra. I don't actually act by by it. Like, I'll get sucked into, we should do social media on LinkedIn because it is so impactful, and everybody reads every post that we ever put. And you know, in all reality, that's not the case. And so every day I ask, what things should I do that makes the biggest impact, and what things shouldn't we be doing that are just following the crowd? So something I'm challenging you guys too, right? Is how do you help us on this journey?
It's been great to chat to you, Justin. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great. Good to chat.
Likewise, Phill, and always enjoy a conversation.
Cult Products is brought to you by Yaya, helping cybersecurity companies define who they're for, what they do, and how they're different. To learn more, visit yaya.co. And don't forget to search for Cult Products in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Follow the show so you never miss an episode. On behalf of the team at Yaya, thanks for listening.